grow year on year. And finally, overall, the applicant ambition has seen the number of UK 18-year-olds securing their firm choice of course. So 200,615 that got their firm place on their application. So really fantastic to see that as well. So that's 2022. We are seeing growth in lots of different areas, but let's think more about 2023, where we are at the moment. We've just obviously, around 4 or 5 months ago, we've just come past the January equal consideration deadline, and I can give you some key statistics around that. So the January deadline actually saw overall applications for full-time undergraduate university and college courses for this autumn actually fall by 2.3%. So it was 596,590 applications we had through, which is actually a lot less than last year, which was 610,720. So a little bit less than last year, but overall, the number of UK 18-year-olds applying alongside that has decreased by 1.8% as well. But just to put it in perspective, the application rate for UK 18-year-olds is at 41.5% compared, yes, to last year, which is 43.4%. But that's the second highest ever number of UK 18-year-olds to apply to university and college by the January deadline. So the highest being, as I said, last year, 43.4, 41.5 this year. So just as we are sort of increasing year on year, we are getting more 18-year-olds that are applying. I know the bit of a drop from last year, but still significant rise from where we were, and especially before the pandemic, which was 275,300. So we're actually up by 14.3% from 2020. There's also been a bit of a decline in mature applicants. So that's actually fallen to 14% decline. And we feel that's down to a decrease in nursing course demand as well. So we have seen that decrease as well from our data. The international demand continues to grow. So there's a 3.1% increase from our January applications in applicants of all ages. So that uplift has been driven by countries such as Nigeria. So their applications sent through are up by 23.1%. So that's one of the countries that really stood out. India was up by 5.4%, and the United States 9.8%. So again, on a year basis, we are seeing a lot more applications coming through from those particular countries. The one country that was actually less this year in terms of applications was China, which was down by 4.2%, which could be likely down to COVID-19 restrictions and disrupted learning, for example. Then finally, this last stat on the right, so 20,510 EU applicants completed applications, but that is actually slightly down by 1.49% from 2022. So just a slight decrease in terms of applications from EU applicants. So I have talked a little bit around obviously last year's cycle and what we've already seen for 2023 as quite a few key stats, for example, with the 18-year-old second highest ever number that we're seeing. And that really leads on from some of the work that we've done on what we call Journey to a Million. And I wanted to share this information with you, this slide that we've got. So obviously our UCAS analytical expertise and knowledge of those trends and patterns of applications and acceptances to education, it allows us to make predictions about future applicant and provider behaviours. So we do actually, as I said, at the moment, we're around 750,000 for 2022 that we know. But we do feel by 2030 that we are aiming towards a million applications that are coming through UCAS, which, as I said a minute ago, is being led by the rise in 18-year-olds, which could be up by 126,000 applying more by 2030, and another 90,000 international applications as well. So we are significantly doing these predictions and seeing that, year on year, there are more and more applications coming through to us. That 2030 cohort, that's the year sevens currently at the moment. And as I go through and talk a little bit more around the UCAS hub and some of the tools and support that we have to really prepare them because of that rise, there's lots of different ways of doing that research earlier and helping to make those decisions. And as we come to the reference later, hopefully it'll make more sense why we have made those changes, so your time can be used in other areas to support with these applications being sent through. So it may not happen, but just to kind of see the picture where we feel applications could be heading towards over the next 6 to 7 years. So that leads us to 2024. So we've looked at the couple of years, and obviously the 2023 cycle. And here we are at 2024, where in the last couple of weeks, it's all been happening at UCAS. So the application itself went live last week on the 16th of May. A couple of weeks before, we had the core search live as well. But we have that overlap obviously for 2023. So applications themselves can't be submitted to UCAS until the 5th of September. And then obviously this year, the two deadlines are, well, I guess two deadlines I've never seen, because the 15th of October obviously has been very rigid for a very long time. But this year we are actually changing it by one day to the 16th of October, the early deadline for medicine, veterinary and dentistry, and those courses at Oxford or Cambridge. And that's due to it falling on a Sunday. So most applications coming through just after the 5th of September, when they can first be submitted, will be for that deadline. But everything else for the 31st of January, again, a really long time, even over the other side of Christmas, that students have to submit their application. And that's because in the last couple of years, we made that decision to move it to the last Wednesday of January, and that happens to be the 31st. So there's a lot of significant time now from it going live right through until then for most applicants that aren't applying for that early deadline. The extra program still works, where students can add their additional choices. Then obviously later on in clearing, when we hit July and August, and obviously there is that late application deadline for the 30th of June. So if anybody wants to apply later and they've got the go-ahead from the university and college, they are able to do that. But obviously we are trying to promote as much as possible to make sure they apply by those on-time deadlines. So that takes us to the UCAS hub. Just going to give a little bit of a overall look of where we are with the UCAS hub, and one sort of caveat with how it looks now. And on the next screen, we are at the point of actually changing a little bit around the design of the UCAS hub. The tools will still be the same, but we'll obviously make you know when that has actually changed when you go to look at that. Obviously, this is still the place that we want to make sure when anyone comes to UCAS that's thinking about making an application, doing their discovery of work of what they want to do, their research, this is the place that they come, because it still is the personalized profile area for somebody when they come to UCAS. And the more information that they tell us of what they want to do, the better it will be to help their journey to university and college. Those 35,000 courses that are available, they are obviously, you can search for that using the UCAS hub and telling us what it is that they want to apply. So every time you're coming back to the same information. It's also the place to then, if you found a part of the country you want to study in, or the universities that you're already favoriting and interested in, we can tell them about open days or virtual events that are happening, so that they know when they're going to be going ahead and can be prepared ready. Lots of other tools in here to support those working out their tariff points, because that's obviously something that we still use to support those entry to the universities and colleges that they need to know that they can get into or not. They have the opportunity to speak to students still through the UCAS hub using UniBuddy, which is a great way of connecting with students, perhaps in a less formal setting, perhaps not from interviews or at lectures. They can just ask those questions that they're on their mind to support their decision making. And our hub lives that we do in our studio. And actually right now there is one happening live in our studio at the moment. So they're really good to promote for support with those understanding a little bit more about what's happening and different parts of the cycle. We then got our careers quiz, which I'll show you in a second. And it's the place where you make your application, which you can see on the top left-hand corner there. So yeah, that's how it would look like on a computer, a laptop, a tablet, with all the different tiles and apps on the page to find the support tools that student needs. I've mentioned a little bit around the obviously some of the areas that are showing here, but what we're trying to do is, even if they're not going to be diving straight into the application, this is a discovery area to find out more, perhaps, make those decisions a bit more about what they want to do. And the careers quiz and what to study next are the two tools available in the UCAS hub that can really support thinking about those career paths and opportunities which they may not have thought about already. The careers quiz actually asks 30 different questions as you go through, and sort of questions to them about, is this something you want to do? Is this something you want to do? Do you want to make a medicine? Do you want to make special effects? And by answering those questions, we're drawing out their personality traits and giving them some suggestions of areas they may want to go into. The same with what to study next. The idea of that is, for example, A-level students, if they tell us the subjects that they're studying at the moment, we can tell them what other students went on to do as data that we have from taking those A-levels. So they can look at those subjects that are showing as those percentages, and again, get some suggestions of courses that they may not have thought about that other students did from those subjects that they're doing at the moment. So it's a really good place to be before even clicking that start option on making an application to get those ideas flowing. And the two ways of searching for courses, if you're just going in and knowing you've looked at university and you're searching for a university, or just keeping it open as a subject, any page of course information, guidance on perhaps a subject guide or a city guide, if somebody knows what they're looking for, they can just favorite the page at the top by clicking the heart, and all that information is saved within their favorites box. Again, so every time they come back to UCAS and the hub, they know exactly where it is and they can continue where they left off. And if they don't, then obviously that's what we're trying to promote with the UCAS hub, and thinking back to those year sevens, and perhaps by 2030 there being more applications, getting them in earlier to the UCAS hub is a great thing, because, for example, the Explore Your Future area will just lay out all the different subjects you could study at higher education. I use the analogy of perhaps Spotify or Amazon Prime, where you've got all your titles or subjects on the screen in front of you, and you're scanning through to research a bit around, what if I do this subject at higher education? What are the job roles? What are the pros and cons? What are the career paths that I could take from learning that subject at higher education? So it's a really good point to start discovering that information, and also thinking about the city guides that are in there, because not only is it trying to work out for a student perhaps where they want to, what they want to study, but where they want to go in the UK, for instance, being there's lots of different areas they could study in. All that information's in there for them to discover. And even now with the application live, if there are lots of students you're supporting that are still a bit unsure, that's the place to go to do that research and find out more. That leads me on to 2024, and I just want to talk a little bit around some changes, first of all, to the application for this year. As you can see, there is a change to the application fee. £27.50 is now the fee to submit the application to us. But that decision means, obviously, if you're paying that fee, you then have access to UCAS Extra, using Clearing, and even Clearing Plus later on. And that's obviously the cost of having 5 choices on the application. It just removes from previous having the single application fee. That's just one set fee for everything that you could then use through UCAS. We have also added the gender options in the application. So there's 2 additional responses that have been added. There is now man, woman, I use another term, and I prefer not to say. So students will be able to access that and answer those when they are filling in their application. And the other thing we've added, or we're going to be adding, it's not been done just yet, sorry, is the access to the historic entry grades tool. This is currently an advisor portal feature, the entry grades tool, and that shares course level information on the grades that students held when entering higher education. So what we found is that students have told us that information would help them make those big informed decisions about their future, of where they want to go, narrowing down their choices on their application. So that's kind of, that statistical information that they want to know and get access to. So what we've done, and obviously later on this year, the entry grades tool is going to actually be made available on ucas.com. That will give students visibility over a range of grade profiles accepted for entry. I believe back to a 5-year period where that data is available. So they'll be able to go in and find out a little bit around those grades that were actually allowed to get onto those particular courses that they're interested in. Again, something that was being requested and we've added. And if you're thinking about those 5 choices on the application, where in years to come, it might be that they are more competitive, they may not actually get all 5 offers from their choices. We're trying to make sure that they are spending more time, anybody applying, to make sure that those 5 choices, if they did just get one offer, that they would still want to go there. And if this is part of that journey to support making those decisions, then we're obviously really glad that that can be part of that decision-making process. So we come to the application. Now, in terms of filling it in, when you click that start button, it's still the same process in terms of that we're trying to get all the sections on the form to be in green, to section complete. Everything that's then in progress will show as blue until it's actually completed. So it's a case of anybody applying through UCAS would need to complete all those sections and complete them before they can submit it. We have worked really hard on the help text. Has been, we really looked through that and make sure it's all correct. So if you are supporting anyone filling it in, more than ever, I would absolutely suggest them clicking the question mark in each area to get the absolute support on what's being asked in those different sections, and any concerns that they have. Obviously, ultimately, you start the profile by continuing on from your registration, personal details, contact information, nationality, and there is that significant new section that we've added in the last year called More About You. And I'll kind of talk a little bit around that with the reference later. When that new section is the area for students to tell, essentially universities and colleges about any circumstances that they may need, support for during their studies. That can be around if they have a disability, or if they're in receipt of free school meals, if they're in care. And as long as that information's in there, we now know that universities and colleges can go to a particular section to read it, rather than having it directly in the personal statement. Obviously, that information can still be put in the statement, and obviously information in the reference, which I'll talk about later. But it just means that it's nice and clear in the application there. And it means that the support can be put in place, potentially for an interview, or if they're attending maybe an open day, or just the first day of the course, for example. So that's one of the parts. And then obviously after that initial area, the more meatier parts of the application are filling in the education history. I think one of the main things with the education area that we always look at and support is to say looking for those transcripts and certificates and exam entry details are really important, because obviously everything that's put in the application needs to be exactly the same as on those certificates, as we'll know they'll be more than likely to be sent on later on for evidence. There's obviously the employment area, where you can then see a paid employment, and obviously the extra activities where it is asked if you have done any, perhaps been to a seminar or a summer school or a lecture, you can enter those information of activities for preparation to higher education. And finally, obviously, the personal statement, which I'm just going to touch upon a little bit in a minute, is one of those sections at the bottom there. One of the things that's really important, I think, especially with the new deadlines, I guess, so to speak, because they are a bit later this year, and the 16th of October is just moved by one day. It's still really important to set an internal deadline so that you've got time to complete the reference, or look over the application before it's actually submitted for either deadline. Working with those students so that you can relax knowing it's done, and they can, and if you need to get in touch with us or the student, we can always support that before the actual deadline. So that moves on to the personal statement. And the first thing I want to say with the personal statement is there is no change to the statement in this particular cycle or next cycle. I think there's been a lot of questions around that and concern with us changing the reference in the cycle. Is the personal statement going to be changed around the corner? That's not the case. So there's no change to the statement this year or in next cycle. But there are things to obviously be thinking about with the statement, and especially with those starting to make their application. And these are some of the questions that I know will be from provider side being thought about, and what will be considered when it's being looked at. And also, obviously, from those supporting writing a personal statement, what should they be thinking about at the moment, going through towards either the early deadline before the January deadline. And one of the main things is obviously to make sure that as you're going through that journey of starting to think about, if you've got 3 subjects, why is it that one particular area is the place to go, the subject that student really wants to do at higher education? So they need to make sure it's clear that they've chosen that course for the right reasons. And I think probably the best way of doing that, and I'll show you some more evidence ideas in a minute, is to make sure they're starting to perhaps, or encourage really, just starting to jot down bullet points or notes around that kind of what we call super curricular work that's above the syllabus that they're learning at the moment. And there's lots of different ways of getting that evidence, which I'll explain in a minute. Now, we know obviously many students have had to, to work during the pandemic. So I always refer to working in a new learning environment or studying independently. This is obviously something that has happened to students perhaps sooner than expected in their career path. So it's quite important to perhaps talk about that more than ever. So they've actually perhaps had to work more digitally sooner, or away from their peers, or work in a different one-to-one perspective to get that guidance and support. So that's something that can be really divulged in the personal statement to obviously providers looking at this and considered to understand, and obviously the same for supporting students writing this. So thinking about that way of working that's been slightly different to perhaps years gone by, and making that clear, and perhaps using it to the advantage to explain that adaptation to a new environment. We're obviously still promoting the fact that the personal statement is going to be around 80% about the academic achievements that student's been doing, but it's still important to explain the 20% perhaps around extracurricular activities, such as if they're in a team or a club, and maybe they use leadership skills, for example, as a captain, or different skills as part of a club, to really talk about those other areas that aren't just from the Monday to Friday, from the subjects that they're learning before moving to the next stage. I'm going to look at some of that evidence, and I think that kind of shows how motivated and committed they are by the different things they're doing above what they're learning at the moment. So the more that's included, the more that it will show they're ready for this next part of their journey. And obviously, being that we've got a lot of time now to make an application, that will really support writing it, proofreading it, drafting it, redrafting it, to make sure that there's good numeracy and literacy skills showed within the statement, or any sort of qualification they may have done on top of that. It's still 4,000 characters or 47 lines that's completed for the statement, so that still works same in the empty box. And it is good point to obviously then, as we look at later on, making sure you've got the time to support looking over the statement if possible. And there's lots of different ways of evidence being included in the statement. I've been to lots of the UCAS exhibitions at the moment, and I know lots of the university and college staff speaking to students, giving lots of guidance about things that are happening at the university, or even something they may have found out that can really drive them on to want to be part of that environment or that particular course. Those are still really important parts of evidence that can be included in the personal statement, just from an exhibition, or even from an open day of actually attending, and maybe even having a conversation with a lecturer around a certain type of perhaps software or current affair that's been read, something that's interested that particular student. Those conversations may be something that's really driven on that interest that can be included here. So that's an actual physical sense of going out and meeting people. And then we also know how work experience plays a huge part in terms of really driving on that interest, whether that's in person or obviously online. So the more information that can be guided through the statement on that, the stronger it's going to be. And also thinking of instances, maybe perhaps for nursing or medicine, where there's more of a emotional aspect to that, where it could be a difficult situation, and somebody may have actually gone through a journey of actually learning more about themselves from being in those situations. Those are the sorts of things that we know really help to drive the personal statement forward, to get a even more understanding of the student that's applying. But there's obviously lots of ways of learning through it at home. So that time, as I said, from Monday to Friday, where they're doing their studies or beyond, it's thinking about the TED Talks or podcasts or online tutorials that can be accessed now online about certain areas, perhaps playing around with some software which could be used in perhaps more creative courses, for example. of things that you may be using at higher education. They're all good ways of evidencing work that's been put in above what's being done at the moment. Or then obviously in the physical side of picking up books or reading articles, perhaps even again, as I mentioned, current affairs. Has there been something that's happening that's really impacted that person applying that they want to talk about, and explain why that's been a part of their thinking, that they want to be learning this subject to a higher level. And I've just included UniBuddy at the bottom there. I've mentioned it a couple of times because it just is something that I really would have loved even myself when applying to university and college, because so much value in still speaking to those students who are already on the courses that they could potentially be applying to, and finding out information, getting maybe even a tip off about, again, software or something that they're already reading about or learning about, that they may think, well, that's interesting, perhaps I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of research on that already. So there's a lot of value in that, and obviously that can be a part of the statement to show that kind of reaching out element to find out more. And I think really that when you're coming to the application at the moment, it's going to be a bit daunting if you just clicked on the personal statement box and saw this empty box asking for 4,000 characters. And I completely understand that, even at the moment where year 12s perhaps studying different subjects are probably still at that point of deciding what it is they want to do. So I think this personal statement builder we've got is so fantastic to really almost just draft and jot down notes or bullet points around certain things that they can come back to over the next few months. The answers that go in our build that you'd answer to the questions that are in here in this builder are going to form the text of the statement. So literally, why are you applying for the course? Why does the subject interest you? Why do you think you're suitable for the course? Those particular answers are really going to form the main part of perhaps even the opening of the text of the statement. But as I mentioned, all those bits of evidence, it's quite likely that that's happening quite regularly for those students that you may be supporting at the moment. So it's really great if they just go into that skills and achievements box at the bottom there and start jotting down those bullet points or some notes around things they've started to learn. And when they come back later on to writing it, they may just see the name of a book or a piece of software or an article, and it will just set off that reaction to go, right, I remember that. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in depth behind what it is I'm applying to here, and just kind of bring some alarm bells later on. But you can also support with those personal statement guides and suggest those, because depending on which subject you're applying to, different things we know will be looked at for different subjects. So it's quite they're really useful to look through. Again, looking at pros and cons of a statement for those subject, guidance of what to include, what to look out for. So that's another way of actually reading more information on what to include within a statement. So that leads me through to the reference, the one area that is changing. So, I mean, the first thing to say with the reference, it's taken a bit of time to obviously get to this point. We've had a lot of reform workshops, and an extensive review that's gone ahead with our advisory groups, including the admissions development group. We've had input from teachers and advisors, obviously, to come to this decision. It's not something that's happened, obviously, straight away. And I think at this point, just to say, in terms of the personal statement, and perhaps over the next couple of years, it will be the same sort of process. And I know we've already been doing reform workshops with the personal statement. I'll mention that a bit at the end, how you can get to those sorts of sessions when we do them. But yeah, so this actual change to the reference from being 4,000 characters or 47 lines within one box to being 3 sections has come about from a considerable amount of work and sessions we've done with different people helping us with this. And I think there is, first of all, like some main key benefits to doing this. And I hope that talking about Journey to a Million and some of the things that we found from the data here will explain why. I think one of the main things is to make sure there's now built-in clarity and confidence that the information you're providing is definitely useful, because universities and colleges want it this way, so they know exactly each section, what it means, where they go to find out the information they need. It also means, because of the way it's put together, with one section being mandatory and the others not, you may find, or as we go through this in a minute, that you then do have more time and resources to have allocated to students on that discovery and research phase of their application journey. So again, talking about journey to 1 million and applications increasing, you can support them with those stages of thinking about those 5 choices on their application. Are they definitely, the right ones and have gone through the right process to pick them? And you can have more time supporting them with that. And as I said, putting them into 3 sections means that universities and colleges can easily find their information when making their decisions. I'm going to go through each of these sections in a bit more detail, but obviously I can do as much as I can, over the next 20 minutes or so. But there is in-depth guidance on our website for the reference section. There's a lot of information on there, including FAQs, full exemplars we've now got for each section. So I would always say go to those if you're a bit unsure again when you're actually writing it, and it just clearly gives you a bit more information there. So let's head on to section 1 of the reference and how this works. So that opening section 1 is actually the mandatory area of the reference. So in other words, the other 2 sections aren't. This is the area where you definitely would need to enter something. And this is the area where you contextualize the education experience of the student you're writing the reference for. This could be, for example, something that's important to let universities know about perhaps the demographics of the school, or if there's any limitations to the portfolio of study that can be taken. For example, perhaps there's only certain subjects that were available and they've had to take those subjects from the options that were actually presented to them at the time. So it's about making those school or college or centre policies known within this opening section, so that universities and colleges looking at it know exactly those circumstances for that particular person and their application. So it can also be an area, so information that can be listed about, as I say, the school, college, or centre, and it can be any information that may have affected performance as well that could be included here. Even as an extreme, if there was damage to buildings, if there was any significant staff changes throughout the year that may have affected learning, or also if there are any your policies and processes that are being used for predicted grades, or if you're not predicting grades, some context why you're not. So ultimately, this first section, and being that it's mandatory, it could actually be a case that this particular section is going to be similar for all students that you may be writing for. So if you're completing more than one for a school, college, or centre, the information in here could be exactly the same from one to the other. And because of that, I just wanted to highlight in the advisor portal how the reference template works. So when you log into the advisor portal, however you work this within your school, college, or centre, that reference template or that information we've just gone through can be put together, added as a template in here. So this is the area where it's actually put in as a template. So whether the coordinator does this or whoever's in charge of your advisor portal to do that, that can be put in that particular section. And then when you come to entering the text for the first section of the reference, you can just add it as a reference template text into that first section. So which it might sound bizarre. I'm sitting here saying that you could have that first section the same as lots of different students, but this is this change that we're making to the reference. That's absolutely fine, because that first section is just about the school, college, or centre context. So that's absolutely fine if you want to put the template in there and use it for different students for that first particular section. That moves us on to section 2 and 3. So section 2, so this section isn't mandatory to complete on the application. So if there isn't anything to put in this section, that's absolutely fine. So this is something to sort of get you a bit more used to. You may think that obviously in terms of the reference, there should be something that entered in all these particular boxes, but as I say, it's not mandatory. If applicable, this is where you'd enter any information about extenuating circumstances, which may have then affected the applicant's education and achievement. So this could be for those individual circumstances, perhaps if they've had a disability, chronic illness, perhaps a bereavement in the family or of a friend. This information could be put in here just to give a bit more context that may have affected, obviously, their educational journey. You could also be listing information here on context as to why there might be a disparity between an individual's grades that have been achieved through the school or college. for example, between GCSEs and predicted grades. You could be listing information about any factors that limited the student's choice of subjects. Or, I mean, looking back to more about you that I mentioned earlier in the application, if they've mentioned those circumstances, if they have a disability, if they're in full-time care, or anything that affects their learning, or where they need extra support, this is the area to talk about that. And if you've had that discussion with the particular student and you're aware of it, and they're happy with you to give that more information in the reference here, you can always suggest things to the university and college of how they learn and how you support them. And I guess if that's included, then the conversation can be had with where that student's applying to with that student to give them that support and perhaps use the same method going forward. So that's your chance to really give a bit more information here. So hopefully they will include that information in more about you. But if you need to still have that conversation with them, make them aware of what you can include, that will really support them going forward. And this is the area to do it on the application. As I said, not compulsory. So if there isn't information to be put in here, that's absolutely fine. Then the section 3. And we know we've had lots of different questions about this section, and we have obviously come back to it and made sure there's lots of, again, relevant information, exemplars on our website. This is the area to outline any other supportive information that's specific to the applicant, relevant to the course they're applying to, that you think universities and colleges should be aware of. And I think the first thing to say about this is that you'll know your applicant students that are applying, you'll know them best. So this is the opportunity to let them know of any further circumstances that they should really be aware of. And the main thing with this section, it's not supposed to be an area where you'd craft the perfect paragraph. This should be short, clear, factual statements that really help universities and colleges digest the information so they know exactly where to go. And the focus should ideally be on subjects relevant to the course applied for. But student tutors could continue to provide 1 or 2 sentences that are evidence-based in their area, which highlight specific achievement or potential. So that is still possible in certain areas where you think, right, they've really excelled in this particular subject area, that needs to be included in here. But I think the main thing to say is it's remembering to focus on that factual, concise statements rather than in the past with the reference, the carefully crafted prose to give that information in here. But some more examples of what to include. You could be including evidence of suitability for the course they're applying to. So that may include their performance in academic ability and relevant UK level 3 or equivalent qualifications. You could be talking about any relevant work experience that they've done, or cases where a student is perhaps that strongest performer in their cohort or from their extracurricular achievements that you want to make known to where they're applying to. You can also include anything about any barriers the applicant has faced in accessing work experience opportunities, or even being able to go to an interview, anything that's affected them on their journey to higher education here, where it's relevant. So I've seen a few other questions around this particular section, around sort of how universities and colleges will be using the academic information to make a decision. So if it's not just for the original 5 choices, will they be using it also through confirmation and clearing? And I think the answer with that really is that with all aspects of the application process, providers are going to be autonomous in making decisions on how they use the information in the application form. So each provider could be giving different weighting to particular aspects. Some may review parts of the application form for near-miss students to help make confirmation decisions, and that could still include the personal statement or all the sections of the reference. So it could work differently from one provider to another, but it's there. If it's on the application, they are able to use it, but still thinking about the entire application. I know there's also been some concerns about whether or not to put, if you don't put information in this particular section, is it going to then, disadvantage a student if it's not included? So the guidance, it's been refocused to ask advisors to write those short, concise, and factual sentences, to demonstrate suitability for the courses that they're applying to and to share that context to the application. It's probably quite likely that advisors are going to be identifying something supportive to state about each student in this particular area. But as with all aspects of the application process, including entry requirements, the use of the personal statement, and even contextual admissions, we would still always recommend that applicants and advisors check the local requirements when using the course search. So they would still flag up if there is anything extra they are still looking for to be talked about on the application here. The information then that's been provided by advisors for the reference itself isn't changing, as you can see. It's just really that the three sections are streamlining that information that was in one huge box before, and that's more, that content is more structured. I think the main thing to think about is really how to refine and refocus the information that's previously been entered, into three different sections. Like I say, short factual paragraphs or lines of information rather than one continued prose. And the character count itself for the reference is still 4,000 characters or 47 lines, but that's a limit. So it's not a target in any sense anymore. So if you don't use even half of that, or don't, and you're just entering information in the first section, that's still fine. And as universities and colleges are aware of that, how this is put together now. Just remember that we're going to still review this change. We will be surveying universities and colleges on the 2024 entry references. So that'll be just after the equal consideration deadline on the 31st of January next year. And that's to really understand if this has provided the value that's required in practice. And then obviously we can work from that of any potential refinements if necessary for 2025 entry onwards. So we are still looking at that as we go through. Oh yeah, I really hope that has helped with a bit more understanding here. But I know we have worked really hard on that particular reference page on our website, which is on the link on few slides back. There are some brilliant exemplars on each section, so you can always look through a few examples there. And the FAQ is quite extensive that goes right down the page. So hopefully some of the things I've mentioned here, if they've not been answered, you can have a look through to get that support. Now, I just want to go a little bit off from references, just to mention apprenticeships at this point, because I think it's really important. We've talked about applications on the rise. Apprenticeships and interest in apprenticeships is equally in the same way on the rise. And that's obviously a fantastic other avenue that we can support students thinking about, especially with applications rising so high, which we believe they will in the next 6 or 7 years. You'll be interested to know that actually 627,516 new people to UCAS, so those who have never been to our website or made an application at all, have visited our apprenticeship web pages that we have available. We've now got the go ahead to take over a huge amount of information on apprenticeships, and therefore not just students coming for university and college information, they're also coming to find out about apprenticeships. And that content, including our industry guides, so not just city guides and subject guides, you can find out what it would be like to work in a certain industry for our guides. They've had a 41% increase in views over the last year. So there you go, 1,139,086 in total. So, a huge amount of interest in finding out more about those industries from last year. We've also, and obviously the main area, there's been a huge increase in using our UCAS Career Finder to search for apprenticeships and then go through and make an application. The 21% more now using the UCAS Career Finder to look at those opportunities out there, and 44% of those using it now clicking to apply. So obviously we hold the information for employers, but you go through to their website to make that application to them for that apprenticeship. And then 40% of those who are interested in undergraduate degrees are telling us they're also interested in apprenticeships, which really drives us on to make sure that we are going to develop the UCAS hub and make sure that parity of choice from both options is laid out in front of any student coming to UCAS. And therefore, over the next years with those increase in applications, they've got those other options there to think about. And just to show you how it looks on our page, so it's ucas.com/apprenticeships to get all the relevant apprenticeship guidance. So if you need extra support to find out more, that's where students go, or for yourselves to learn more about what an apprenticeship is, those fantastic industry guides to find out more about those areas that the student could go into. There is support on degree apprenticeships, what they are, how they work, what's available. You can even filter by degree apprenticeships now on our course search. And obviously that UCAS career finder, which is where you search for apprenticeship vacancies. It's really great as well because you can set up a job alert. So students can actually get an email or a notification to say when an opportunity has come up for that subject they're interested in, and then go and apply to it alongside perhaps their university or college application. And to support you, we've also got a brilliant e-learning course on apprenticeships in our professional development platform. So that's where we hold all our e-learning courses, whether it's about references, statements, the application, the hub. We've now made one just purely on apprenticeships, which is split over 5 units. So I wouldn't want anyone to go in there and do all that all in one go because it could take a couple of hours, but it really helps you to go through one stage at a time to learn what an apprenticeship is, how to search and apply, considering them side by side, university and apprenticeships, and those resources to help. So you can enroll on that for free and continue through to do those units of that particular course if you wanted to do so. And just a few more little resources to get from UCAS, lots of help. You can sign up to our monthly newsletters that come through to your inbox. So any updates or information we need to let you know, you can sign up and get that straight through. That's probably the best way of getting the information. But ultimately, you can also come to ucas.com/advisors, where there's a timeline, and each month will show you the key events and things that are happening in that particular month. There's lots of live sessions that we've done, and to let you know, there have been 2 advisor live reference sessions purely on the reference section that's been updated in the last couple of weeks, which you can access and watch back. So that's I think around 45-50 minutes, quite a long session there with a bit more information. But that's also where you go to join those reform sessions on the personal statement or other particular areas that we know you may need help with on parts of the application. And for any sort of personalized sessions a bit like this, you can find out from our advisors training area if you wanted to look into any sessions that you may need or any events or conferences that we have coming up. And the advisor guide for 2024 has just gone live as well. So that's our guide for everything to know about 2024. And we've also added some great support for classroom activities. There's downloadable presentations around applying for UCAS, some similar bits to some of the information today, which you may need for helping other colleagues, and the presentations tailoring to parents and obviously for students for learning about the UCAS hub or making an application. It's all there now. We call it the 2024 cycle toolkit, where you can download that information to support you. And that's all in the ucas.com advisors page. And just finally, if you want to get in touch with us, we've got our customer success team there and the email address. So they're available Monday to Friday. Do give them a call if you need any support. And our team, the team I'm in, digital learning team, training@ucas.ac.uk will be the email address if you want to contact me after today or through the team there. And that's what the professional development platform looks like if you do want to enroll on any of those free modules to help your learning. So pdp.ucas.com. So that's all from me at the point. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope that's been really helpful. I'd say more than happy to answer any questions. If I don't know the answers, I'll come back to you as soon as possible.
Thanks very much, Ross. We don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. So if anybody's got any questions, we'll just give you a couple of minutes if you want to type anything in. I just had one question, Ross, just around, I know you mentioned obviously that the personal statement isn't changing for this cycle or the next cycle. Have you got any idea what might change when it does come around to it, or is that all still in consultation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've heard lots of different suggestions. Even last year, I think it was. It could be a similar situation where we think about the reference and having those different sections. Because thinking about the personal statement builder, where it specifically asks, why is this the right chosen course? Those questions, it may look a bit like that. that's just one suggestion. I really couldn't say for definite. These are all things that are being thrown around at the moment when we have those reform workshops. That's one of the things that's obviously ultimately come to light because of us changing the reference, so thinking on a similar format. But I don't know if that is still going to be the case. I know for years there's always been that push to say, can you submit a statement through multimedia? Could you do a video? Could you produce it in a different way? The idea of UCAS having an attachment area. Obviously, if we did that, there's lots of different things we'd have to think about logistically to do it. So these are all different ideas, but nothing has been confirmed. And I would really welcome anyone to join those reform workshops where you can input your ideas, because we want your help to do that, of course.
That's great. We've just had more of a comment, I think, come in here. Just saying Russell Group Universities, via an Advancing Access CPD session earlier this week, we're happy to see bullet pointed statements in the reference section 3, which is what you mentioned, if it's clear and concise, isn't it?
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just so you know where to go to get that information. And that's what's so great about, similar when you're filling in the form of that more about you section, it's so that you as universities and colleges can go into that area, know exactly what you're looking for, rather than going through that text. So yeah, great to hear that. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions at all? Otherwise, we'll close the session down. And just to remind you that I will be sharing the slides from the session and also the recording from the session once I've got that available in the next couple of days. And obviously, if you do have any questions that haven't come up today, if you think of anything following the session, again, if you just drop me an email, I can just send that on to Ross, and hopefully Ross will be able to either answer it himself or pass it on to the relevant department.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.